The rain was falling softly outside the large window of the old mansion, the kind of gentle rain that made the night feel slower, quieter, and heavier. Inside, the air smelled faintly of medicine and fading roses. The machines beside the bed hummed quietly, showing blinking green and yellow lights that never stopped. And on that bed lay Richard Hall, one of the richest men in the city, a man who had built an empire from nothing but now lay pale and weak, barely holding on. His caretaker, a woman named Emily Ward, stood beside him, holding a warm towel in her hands. Her eyes were tired but kind. She had spent the last 3 years caring for him, every medicine, every meal, every sleepless night. She had seen him angry, gentle, and broken, but never afraid. Yet tonight, there was fear in his eyes. She could feel it, even before he spoke. She still remembered that night. The old clock on the wall struck 11, and a soft thunder rolled in the distance. Emily turned to check the window latch when she heard his voice, weak and low. "Emily," he said, barely more than a whisper. She hurried to his side, bending close so she could hear. His breath rattled, and his eyes darted toward the dark hallway beyond the room. "Don't let them take it," he whispered. Emily frowned, confused. "Take what, sir?" she asked gently, adjusting his blanket. His hand trembled as he reached for hers. "The letters," he said, his voice cracking. "In the box, under the piano. Don't let them find her." Emily's heart gave a small, sharp beat. She had heard him say strange things before when his fever rose or when the pain medicine made him dream, but this sounded different. There was a strange urgency in his voice, as if he was confessing something he had kept buried for years. "Who, sir?" she asked softly. "Who shouldn't I let them find?" But his eyes were already closing, his breathing shallow again. The rain grew heavier outside, tapping the windows in a steady rhythm that filled the silence of the room. Emily stood there, unsure what to do. She looked around the large bedroom, the old paintings on the walls, the golden frames, the heavy red curtains that always seemed to block too much light. Everything about this place felt old, secret, and lonely. She had worked here long enough to know that the mansion itself had stories no one talked about. She had never met any of Mr. Hall's family. He had no wife, no children, no visitors. Only lawyers, doctors, and once in a while, a stranger who came asking about the will. But he always told her to turn them away. "They want the money," he would say, his voice hard. "Not me." That night, though, something felt different. After making sure he was asleep, Emily walked out into the hall, holding her small lamp. The floor creaked under her shoes. The hallway was lined with old photographs of people she didn't know, men in suits, women in long gowns, all from a time when the mansion was alive with voices and laughter. But now it was quiet, except for the soft patter of rain. She walked down the corridor, her steps slow, her mind still on the strange words he had said. "Don't let them take it, the letters, under the piano." She stopped in front of the music room. It was always locked, but tonight, she noticed the door was slightly open. A faint smell of dust and wood filled the air. She pushed it open carefully and entered. The room was dark except for the light from her lamp. The grand piano stood in the center, its surface covered in a thin layer of dust. She hadn't seen anyone touch it in years. Slowly, she kneeled down and lifted the cloth that hung from its front. Beneath it, she saw a small wooden box. It looked old, with a brass lock that was slightly rusted. She reached for it, her heart beating fast. Before she could touch it, a sound made her jump. "Emily?" She turned quickly. It was the night nurse, Sarah, a younger woman who came for the late shifts twice a week. Her face looked pale in the lamplight. "What are you doing here?" Sarah asked, glancing at the piano. Emily hesitated, not wanting to explain everything. "Mr. Hall wasn't feeling well," she said. "I came to check on him and thought I heard something here." Sarah nodded slowly, though her eyes showed doubt. "All right. I just came to take my shift. You should get some rest." Emily gave a small smile, but her thoughts were still tangled with what she had just found. She left the room quietly, her lamp shaking a little in her hand. That night, she couldn't sleep. The image of the box stayed in her mind, as if it was calling to her. What letters was he talking about? And who was the her he didn't want anyone to find? The next morning, the mansion felt different. The sky was gray, and a cold wind swept through the garden. Emily was preparing breakfast when she heard a loud crash upstairs. Her heart leapt. She ran up the stairs to Mr. Hall's room. The doctor and Sarah were already there, trying to calm him. He was awake, gasping, his hands clutching the blanket tightly. "Where is it?" he shouted, his voice rough with panic. "You promised, Emily. You said you'd keep it safe." Emily rushed to his side, taking his hand. "It's safe, sir," she said quickly, though she wasn't sure what he meant. His grip loosened, and his eyes met hers, full of desperation and fear. "She'll come," he whispered, his voice fading. "When I'm gone, she'll come for it." Then he closed his eyes again. The doctor adjusted the machines, murmuring something about heart rate and oxygen. Emily stepped back, her own heart pounding. Who was coming? What was in that box? Later that evening, when things had calmed down, Emily went back to the music room. She locked the door behind her. Her hands shook as she reached under the piano again and pulled out the box. The lock clicked open easily, it wasn't locked after all. Inside were several folded letters, yellowed with age, tied together with a red ribbon. On the top was one envelope with a name written in elegant handwriting, "To my daughter." Emily's breath caught. She froze, staring at the name. A daughter? Mr. Hall had a daughter? But he had never spoken of her, not once. She carefully opened one of the letters. The words were shaky, written with emotion. It spoke of regret, of a young woman he had loved long ago, and a child born in secret. It spoke of promises broken, of a family torn apart by greed and lies. Emily felt her chest tighten as she read. The letter ended with a line that made her shiver, "If you ever find this, I hope you forgive me. The truth is hidden where the heart once lived." She placed the letters back in the box, her mind spinning. Should she tell the lawyer? The doctor? No, something told her not to. If what he had said was true, then someone didn't want this truth to come out. She hid the box behind the old piano again and left the room, her heart still pounding. 3 days later, Richard Hall passed away. The mansion was filled with quiet chaos, lawyers coming and going, reporters trying to get photos through the gates, and distant relatives suddenly appearing, pretending to care. Emily stayed in the background, doing her duties quietly. She had grown attached to him, even with all his flaws. Watching him take his last breath had hurt more than she expected. But what haunted her more was the secret he left behind. The day of the will reading arrived. Everyone gathered in the grand living room, men in suits, women with cold eyes, all waiting for their share. The lawyer, Mr. Grant, stood at the front, holding a folder. Emily stood at the back, not supposed to be there, but no one noticed her. The lawyer began to read. The usual things came first, the charities, the businesses, the estates. Then he paused. Richard Hall had written something unexpected. "And to my daughter," Mr. Grant read slowly, his voice careful, "whom I have long searched for and never found, I leave everything that remains of my estate." The room went silent. The air felt heavy. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Murmurs started rising from the crowd. Daughter? He didn't have a daughter, someone said angrily. Another voice hissed, "This must be a mistake." Mr. Grant raised a hand for silence. "It's written clearly in his final will. To my daughter, wherever she may be found, this will shall stand until she claims her rightful place." Emily stood frozen. The words echoed in her mind, mixing with the memory of that night, of his trembling voice, of the letters under the piano. The daughter, she was real. The will proved it. but no one knew who she was, or where she was. As the crowd erupted into confusion and arguments, Emily quietly stepped out of the room. Her hands were cold, her mind racing. She walked down the hallway, her eyes falling again on the closed door of the music room. Behind that door lay the truth, the letters that could prove everything. She knew she couldn't tell anyone yet. Not until she understood what she was holding. That night, as the mansion emptied and silence returned, Emily sat alone by the piano. The rain had started again, tapping gently on the windows, just like that first night. She opened the box again, reading the letters one by one. The story inside them was painful, filled with guilt and love and loss. But one letter was different. It wasn't addressed to the daughter, it was addressed to the one who finds this. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The letter said, "If you are reading this, then I am gone. And she will come. You must protect her, Emily. She doesn't know what they did, or what is hers by blood. But others will try to stop her. They already did once." Emily's heart raced. How did he know she would find this? And who were they? The candlelight flickered as a gust of wind moved through the room. She thought she heard something, a faint noise at the window, like a soft knock. She looked up, her breath catching in her throat. Someone was standing outside in the rain. A woman, dressed in black, watching her through the glass. Emily froze, the letter still in her hands, as the woman slowly raised her hand and touched the windowpane, her eyes dark and unreadable. And then, she smiled. The rain outside the mansion grew heavier, falling in steady sheets against the old windows. Thunder rolled far away, deep and slow, like the sound of something warning her to stay inside. Emily sat frozen beside the piano, the letter trembling in her hands. The candle beside her flickered, its small flame fighting against the cold air creeping through the cracks of the window. And beyond the glass stood that woman, her figure blurred by rain, but still clear enough to see the dark coat, the pale face, and the steady, haunting stare that made Emily's heart tighten in her chest. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The woman didn't knock again. She just stood there, her hand resting lightly on the windowpane as if she knew exactly what Emily had been reading. Then, slowly, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the storm. Emily jumped to her feet, her pulse racing. She hurried to the window and looked outside. The gravel path that led to the gate was empty. Only the sound of rain and the dim glow of the garden lamps remained. She stood there for several seconds, unsure if what she'd seen was even real. Maybe she was tired, she told herself. Maybe her mind was playing tricks after the long days and restless nights. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. The woman had been there. And somehow, Emily felt that this was the person Mr. Hall had warned her about, the one who would come after he was gone. The next morning, the mansion was filled with quiet tension. The will reading had shaken everyone. Newspapers had already begun printing stories about the secret daughter, and cameras had appeared outside the gates. Sarah, the night nurse, looked nervous as she walked through the halls, whispering with the maids about how strange everything had become. Emily stayed silent, pretending to focus on her duties, but her mind was restless. She kept glancing at the piano room door, worried someone might find what she had hidden there. Mr. Hall's lawyer, Mr. Grant, arrived again that afternoon. He was a tall man with gray hair and a calm face that always seemed unreadable. He asked to see Emily privately in the study. The air inside the room smelled of old books and dust. He sat behind the large oak desk, his hands folded neatly. "Emily," he began softly, "you were with Mr. Hall during his last days. Did he ever mention anything about a daughter?" Emily hesitated. She didn't want to lie, but she couldn't tell him everything, not yet. "No," she said slowly. He never mentioned her directly. But sometimes he said strange things. He seemed worried. Mr. Grant nodded. "He changed his will 3 months ago," he said. "No one knew. Not even me until after his passing. He gave strict instructions to leave everything to his daughter, if she ever appeared. He looked up at Emily. But here's the strange thing, he didn't list her name anywhere. Only the words, "to my daughter." That's it. Nothing else. Emily's stomach tightened. So the lawyer didn't know either. "Do you think she's real?" she asked quietly. Mr. Grant sighed, rubbing his temples. "There are rumors, of course. Years ago, before Mr. Hall's business empire, he had a brief relationship with a woman from another city. No one knows what happened, but it ended suddenly. He never married after that." He leaned forward. "If she exists, she's the only rightful heir now. But if no one finds her within a year, the estate goes to charity. That's what the will states." Emily nodded, pretending to take in the information calmly. But her thoughts were far from calm. That letter she had found, the one addressed to my daughter, was proof that she existed. That woman in the rain, could it have been her? That night, Emily couldn't rest. The mansion felt colder than usual. Every sound echoed louder in the empty halls. Around midnight, she walked downstairs with her lamp, unable to ignore the uneasy feeling growing inside her. The shadows stretched long across the marble floor, and the ticking of the hallway clock sounded unnaturally loud. She reached the piano room again and closed the door behind her. The box of letters was still there, safe where she had left it. She opened the top and ran her fingers over the faded paper, reading the words over and over again. Then she noticed something new. One of the letters had a faint symbol drawn on the corner, a circle with 2 lines crossing it. She hadn't seen it before. Carefully, she turned the paper over. There was something written in small letters near the bottom: "If she finds this, show her the key hidden where the light never reaches." Emily frowned. What key? And what did "where the light never reaches" mean? Her mind went to the basement. It was the darkest place in the mansion, locked for years. The staff never went there because Mr. Hall had given strict orders to keep it closed. But if there was a key, it had to mean something. The next morning, she decided to go down there. She waited until everyone was busy. Sarah was in the kitchen, the cleaners were upstairs, and Mr. Grant had gone to meet the reporters outside. She took the small master key set from the office drawer and walked quietly toward the basement door. Her footsteps echoed softly against the stone walls. The door was old and heavy, with rusted hinges. It took her 3 tries before the key finally turned and the door creaked open. A cold, damp air hit her face. The smell of dust and old wood filled her nose. She held her lamp up and walked down the narrow staircase, the light trembling slightly. The steps groaned under her weight. The basement was larger than she remembered, full of covered furniture, old trunks, and shelves lined with forgotten objects. Cobwebs hung in the corners, and the only sound was the slow dripping of water from somewhere in the dark. She walked deeper until the light from her lamp reached a far wall. There, behind an old wardrobe, she noticed a loose brick near the floor. Something about it caught her attention. It looked newer than the others. She knelt down and pushed it gently. It slid back, revealing a small hollow space. Inside was a small metal key wrapped in a piece of cloth. Her heart skipped a beat. The key was silver, with the same circle and cross symbol engraved on it. She lifted it carefully, wiping the dust off. What was this supposed to open? Her mind went through every locked door and drawer she knew of in the house. Then she remembered the old cabinet in Mr. Hall's study, the one he never let anyone touch. She had always assumed it was just full of documents. Maybe it was more than that. Just as she was about to leave the basement, she heard something upstairs. A door closing. Then footsteps. She froze, holding her lamp tightly. The footsteps were slow, deliberate. Someone was walking above her, near the staircase. She waited, not breathing. Then the sound stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Slowly, she climbed back up, her heart pounding. When she opened the basement door, the hallway was empty, but the front door was slightly open. A trail of wet footprints led from the entrance toward the living room. Someone had been inside. She followed the footprints quietly, gripping the key in her hand. The trail ended near the study. The door was half open, and the faint smell of perfume hung in the air, a soft floral scent that didn't belong to anyone who lived there. She pushed the door open slowly. The room was empty. But the window was open, rain blowing in from the storm outside. And on the desk lay a single folded note. Her hands shook as she picked it up. There was no name, only a short line written in neat handwriting. "You found the letters. Now find me before they do." Emily's stomach dropped. The woman knew. She had been inside the house. Somehow, she knew exactly what Emily had discovered. And they? Who were they? That evening, Mr. Grant returned with new information. He looked more serious than before. "Emily," he said, "someone just came to my office. She claimed to be Mr. Hall's daughter." Emily's heart nearly stopped. "Did you meet her?" He nodded slowly. "Briefly." She refused to give her full name but showed an old locket with a picture of Mr. Hall when he was young. She said it was the only thing her mother left her. "I couldn't confirm it yet, but," he paused, watching her closely. "She said she wanted to come here tomorrow." Emily tried to stay calm, but inside, her thoughts were racing. Could this be the same woman she saw last night? Was she real, or was someone pretending to be her for the fortune? That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She sat by her window, looking out at the garden. The rain had stopped, leaving the grass wet and shining under the moonlight. The mansion was quiet, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still out there, watching. Around midnight, she heard a faint sound again, a knock, soft but clear. She stood up quickly and looked toward the front door. There it was again. She walked downstairs slowly, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. The knocking came once more, softer this time. She hesitated, then reached for the door handle and pulled it open. Standing there, drenched from the rain, was the same woman she had seen the night before. Her dark coat clung to her shoulders, her hair wet and falling around her face. But her eyes, those deep, searching eyes, were full of something Emily couldn't describe. Fear. Hope. And a kind of pain that came from years of being lost. "I'm sorry to come this way," the woman said, her voice low but steady. "But I think you know who I am." Emily didn't move. She just stared, unable to find her words. The woman took a slow breath. "My name is Anna," she said softly. "Anna Hall." The name hit Emily like a shock. She gripped the doorframe for balance. So it was true. The daughter was real. And she was standing right there. But before Emily could say anything, lightning flashed outside, followed by a deafening crash of thunder. The lights flickered once, twice, and then the entire mansion went dark. In the darkness, Anna whispered, "They're here." The lights went out with a sharp click, and the mansion fell into heavy darkness. The storm outside raged louder, the thunder rolling across the sky like the sound of something ancient waking. Emily stood frozen by the open door, her hands still gripping the frame as cold air swept inside. She could barely see Anna's face now, only the faint outline of her wet hair and the glint of her eyes in the dark. Somewhere upstairs, a window banged open, and the wind howled through the empty halls. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Only the sound of rain and wind filled the silence. Then Emily's voice came, soft and uncertain. "Who's here?" Anna turned her head toward the staircase, her voice low and tense. "The people who never wanted me to exist." The word sent a chill through Emily's chest. She quickly closed the door and locked it, pressing her back against it as if that could keep the storm and the fear outside. She grabbed a small lamp from the hallway table and lit it, the flame flickering weakly. The faint light revealed Anna's pale face, the sharp lines of exhaustion and worry around her eyes. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. "Please," Anna said quietly. "I didn't come to hurt anyone. I just need to find what my father left for me. He said someone here would help me. I think that person is you." Emily stared at her. The way she spoke, the calm sadness in her tone, reminded her so much of Mr. Hall's voice during his gentler moments. She wanted to believe her. But she also knew that the moment the world learned about this woman, everything in that mansion, and everything she had found, would change. "He did leave something," Emily said slowly. "Letters. They're hidden." Anna took a deep breath. "Then it's true," she whispered. "He tried to tell me for years. My mother kept everything secret, said he was dead. When she passed away, I found one letter in her things, a letter from him. It told me to come here after he was gone. But when I arrived in the city, I was followed." She looked toward the window nervously. "I think they were his business partners. They never wanted his money to go to me. They want to make sure I disappear before anyone can prove who I am." Emily's stomach twisted. "You mean someone wants to stop you from claiming the inheritance?" Anna nodded. "Yes. But it's not just the money. There's something else, something he hid that could destroy everything they built. My mother told me he regretted trusting them." Her voice broke slightly. "I didn't even know his face until a few months ago." Emily's heart softened. She could see the pain behind Anna's calmness. She could see the lost child in her eyes, the one who had grown up without a father, without answers. And she remembered the letters, the words of regret, the line that said protect her. She knew now that this was the woman Mr. Hall had meant. Before Emily could speak again, a sound echoed through the house. A slow, heavy creak from upstairs. Both women turned their heads. The sound came again, footsteps, soft but clear, moving across the floor above them. "Someone's in the house," Anna whispered. Emily felt her pulse race. She grabbed the small lamp and motioned for Anna to follow her quietly. They moved through the dark hallway, their shadows stretching across the walls. Every sound seemed louder now, the ticking clock, the whisper of the rain, the slow groan of the old wood under their feet. When they reached the stairs, Emily held her breath and listened. The footsteps had stopped. The house was silent again. They climbed the stairs slowly, step by step. At the top, the air felt colder, heavier. The corridor stretched long and empty, the paintings on the walls watching them like silent witnesses. Emily pointed toward Mr. Hall's room. "We should check there first," she whispered. When they reached the door, it was slightly open. The smell of medicine still hung in the air. Emily pushed it open gently, and the lamplight spread across the room. Everything was as she left it, neat, quiet, untouched. But on the bedside table lay something that hadn't been there before, a folded envelope with her name written on it. Emily froze. She stepped closer and picked it up. The handwriting was unmistakable, it was Mr. Hall's. Her throat tightened. How was that possible? She had already gone through all his things. Slowly, she opened the envelope and pulled out a single page. The message was short, written in shaky letters. "Emily, if you are reading this, then she has come. Trust no one outside these walls. The truth is in the key. Keep it safe until the clock strikes 3. She looked up at Anna, who was staring at the note with wide eyes. "He knew I would come," Anna whispered. "He planned this." Emily reached into her pocket and took out the small silver key she had found in the basement. She held it up in the dim light. The same circle and cross symbol shone faintly on it. "He said the truth is in the key," she said softly. Anna leaned closer, her brow furrowed. "Do you know what it opens?" Emily shook her head. "I think it's something in his study." Before they could move, the sound of glass shattering echoed through the hallway. Both women jumped. The lamp flickered wildly. Emily turned toward the door, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would burst. From somewhere downstairs came a voice, low, muffled, and angry. "Check every room." Anna grabbed Emily's arm. "They're here." Emily blew out the lamp, plunging them into darkness. They could hear footsteps moving below, several of them. The voices grew clearer now, men's voices, rough and impatient. "She has to be here," one of them said. "The lawyer said she'd come back tonight." Anna's grip tightened on Emily's sleeve. "We have to hide," she whispered. They slipped out of the room and moved down the narrow servants' hallway behind the main corridor. It was dark and cold, the air thick with dust. Emily led the way, remembering every creak in the floor from years of walking there at night. The footsteps downstairs grew louder, moving toward the staircase. She heard one of the men mutter something about letters and proof. So they knew about the letters. That meant someone must have told them, maybe even someone inside the mansion. Emily's thoughts went to Sarah, the night nurse. She had always seemed too curious about everything. Could she have told them? They reached the back of the house, near the old library. Emily pushed the door open quietly. The room was filled with shelves from floor to ceiling, their shadows stretching like dark fingers across the floor. She closed the door softly and led Anna toward the far wall where a large portrait hung. Behind it was a small hidden alcove, one only Emily knew about. She had discovered it by accident months ago while cleaning. It was narrow, just enough space for two people to crouch. They slipped inside and waited. For a long time, there was only silence. Then the sound of boots echoed in the hallway. The door to the library creaked open. A flashlight beam swept across the room. Emily held her breath, clutching Anna's hand tightly. She could hear them talking. She must have the letters. Search everything. The boss wants that key too. The light passed dangerously close to the portrait. Emily's heart hammered so hard it hurt. But after a few minutes, the men moved out, their footsteps fading down the hall. Emily waited another moment before letting out a shaky breath. Anna's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "They're not going to stop," Anna whispered. "We have to find whatever my father left before they do." Emily nodded. She pushed open the portrait carefully and stepped out. The library was empty again. She looked at the clock on the wall. It was 2:30. Half an hour until the clock strikes 3, as the letter had said. She didn't know why that time mattered, but she trusted Mr. Hull's words. He had planned everything for a reason. They hurried toward the study. The storm outside was quieter now, but the tension in the house was heavier than ever. When they entered the study, Emily went straight to the old cabinet in the corner, the one Mr. Hull had always kept locked. She inserted the small silver key into the keyhole. For a moment, nothing happened. Then there was a soft click. The door opened slowly, revealing a small box inside. It wasn't like the one under the piano. This one was metal, cold, and heavy. On the top was a symbol, the same circle and cross sign again. Emily lifted it out carefully and placed it on the desk. Anna stood beside her, staring at it with trembling hands. "Open it," she whispered. Emily hesitated. Something about it felt wrong, like opening it would change everything. But she turned the latch anyway. Inside, there were documents, photographs, and a small black notebook. On the first page were Mr. Hull's initials and a single line written in his shaky hand. "If you are reading this, then the truth must be known. They took everything from me, my company, my name, my family. And now they'll try to take her too." Anna's eyes filled with tears. He knew. He knew what they'd do. Emily turned the page. There were signatures, numbers, hidden bank records, evidence of something big. Mr. Hull had written about his business partners stealing millions, hiding crimes under his name, and framing him when he tried to expose them. It was enough to ruin powerful people. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the hallway. Emily slammed the box shut. Voices shouted, "Closer now." They had found them. Anna grabbed the box, and Emily snatched the lamp from the table. "This way," she whispered. They ran through the back door of the study into another hallway. But before they could reach the stairs, a shadow appeared at the end of the corridor. It was Sarah, the night nurse. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp and cold. She looked at the box in Anna's hands, then smiled faintly. "He told you to find it, didn't he?" she said softly. "You should have left it alone, Emily." Anna stepped forward. "You told them where to find me," she said in disbelief. "You worked for them?" Sarah tilted her head slightly. "Work for them? No. I am one of them." The words hit like a blade. Emily's mind reeled as Sarah reached into her coat pocket. "Now," she said quietly, "give me the box before this gets worse." Emily and Anna backed away slowly. The hallway light flickered once. Then there was a loud bang as one of the windows shattered from the storm wind. The sound echoed through the house. For a split second, everyone froze. Then Anna turned and ran toward the stairs, clutching the box. Emily followed, the lamp flickering wildly in her hand. Sarah shouted something behind them, but her voice was drowned by the thunder outside. They reached the bottom of the staircase and ran toward the back door. The clock in the hallway began to chime, 1, 2, 3. Each ring echoed like a heartbeat through the house. When the third chime rang, a sudden noise filled the mansion, a low mechanical hum from somewhere deep below. The floor vibrated slightly. Anna stopped, looking around in confusion. "What's that?" Emily realized with a shock, it was coming from the basement. The moment the clock struck 3, something had awakened beneath them. For days after that, Elena couldn't sleep. The name Clara Beaumont echoed inside her head like a haunting tune that wouldn't fade. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mr. Beaumont's weak smile on his final day, the way his lips trembled as if he wanted to say something more, something he had taken to the grave. The house, once quiet but peaceful, now felt heavy, like the walls themselves were hiding secrets. The air smelled faintly of old wood and dust, and even the ticking clock in the hallway seemed louder than before. She spent most nights sitting in the study, staring at the flickering fireplace, clutching the letter he had once written to her thanking her for her care. But now, that letter felt different, almost as if it was part of a bigger message she hadn't understood yet. One cold evening, as the wind howled outside and rain began tapping softly against the large windows, Elena went through the drawers in his study once again. She had already searched them before, but this time she was desperate. Something inside her whispered that she had missed something important. The drawers were filled with the same papers, business records, receipts, and old photographs of the estate. But in the bottom drawer, hidden beneath a stack of envelopes, she found a small black notebook tied with a leather strap. Her hands trembled as she untied it. Inside, the first few pages were blank, but then came pages filled with Mr. Beaumont's handwriting, rough, shaky, and emotional. The first line made her heart skip a beat. "If anyone finds this, I hope you'll understand why I had to do it." Her breath caught. She turned the page slowly. "They said I had no family, but they were wrong. I had a daughter once, a secret I thought I could bury. Her name was Clara. I never meant to abandon her." Elena sat frozen. The rain outside grew louder, and thunder rolled in the distance. She kept reading, her fingers tracing the faded ink. He wrote about a woman named Anna, a young woman he had loved long ago before his wealth and business consumed him. Anna had disappeared one day, pregnant, and he had spent years searching for her but never found her again. The guilt had eaten him alive. He had built his empire, but his nights were haunted by the thought of a daughter somewhere in the world who didn't even know who he was. As she read, tears filled Elena's eyes. She had cared for him for years, seen his pain and loneliness, but she had never known this. He had never spoken of love or regret. To everyone else, he was a cold, distant man. But these pages revealed something else entirely, a man who was broken inside, trying to atone for something unforgivable. Then she found a more recent entry. I found her name again after 40 years. Clara Beaumont. The name appeared in an old hospital record. I can't face her, not like this. But I'll do what I can. Maybe one day she'll know I never stopped thinking about her. Elena closed the book, pressing it against her chest. The storm outside raged harder, the lightning flashing through the windows. The truth was clear now. Clara wasn't some stranger trying to take his money. She was his blood. His lost daughter. But then another thought struck her like a bolt of lightning. If he had found Clara before his death, why hadn't he told Elena? Why hadn't he brought Clara to the mansion? Something didn't fit. She reopened the notebook and flipped to the last written page. The date was 2 weeks before his death. I don't trust everyone around me anymore. Some people want the estate more than I want to leave it. If anything happens to me before I can see her, I hope someone kind will tell Clara the truth. Elena's heart pounded. The words, "if anything happens to me," echoed like a warning. She remembered how suddenly his condition had worsened, how he had seemed frightened days before the end, glancing toward the door whenever someone entered. What if he hadn't just died of sickness? What if someone had made sure he never spoke again? Her thoughts raced. She remembered something else, the nurse who had worked the night before he died, the one who had transferred from another branch only days earlier. She had found her behavior odd, but hadn't questioned it then. The woman had vanished right after the funeral, never returning to the hospital. Elena grabbed her coat, heart racing. She couldn't stay still. She needed to know more. She took the notebook with her and drove through the storm to the hospital records department. The night clerk, an old friend of hers named Maria, looked startled when Elena showed up drenched and pale. "Elena, what's wrong?" she asked. Elena placed the notebook on the desk. "I need to find information about the nurse who worked with Mr. Beaumont before he died. Her name was... I think it was Laura Green." Maria frowned and began typing. The computer keys clicked rapidly. After a few minutes, her expression changed to confusion. "That's strange. There's no record of any Laura Green ever being assigned to his case, or even working here." Elena felt cold all over. That can't be right. She was there. I spoke to her. She was the one who gave him his medication that night. Maria shook her head. No file, no photo, no employee number. Elena, whoever that woman was, she wasn't from this hospital. The realization hit like a punch to the stomach. If that nurse wasn't real, then who was she? And what had she done to Mr. Beaumont? Elena's mind reeled. She thanked Maria and drove back through the storm, gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She couldn't stop thinking about his final night, the way he had tried to speak, his eyes filled with something close to fear. When she reached the mansion, the rain had stopped, but the silence felt even heavier than before. She went straight to the study again, determined to find more answers. She pulled open the desk drawers one last time, searching for anything that could point to that mysterious nurse. Underneath a pile of old letters, she found a folded photograph. It was faded and creased, but the face was clear enough. A young woman with kind eyes, standing beside Mr. Beaumont in front of a hospital. On the back, written in his shaky handwriting, were the words, "Anna and Clara, 1984. Elena's heart stopped. The woman in the photo wasn't Anna, it was the same woman who had called herself Nurse Laura Green. Her breath came fast and shallow. The woman who had cared for him in his final days was Clara herself. But if that was true, why had she hidden her identity? Why had she pretended to be someone else? As the clock struck midnight, Elena sat alone in the dark study, the photograph trembling in her hand. She looked toward the hallway, half expecting to hear footsteps or a whisper. The mansion felt alive with secrets. She didn't know who to trust anymore, maybe not even herself. Her thoughts swirled, and a chill ran down her spine as the wind rattled the window panes. She had uncovered the truth about the lost daughter, but with that truth came something darker, something unfinished. Because if Clara had been there all along, pretending to be someone else, then the real question wasn't who she was. It was why. And somewhere deep inside the mansion, in the quiet shadowed corners of the house she thought she knew, Elena felt certain of one thing: this story wasn't over yet. The next morning, sunlight spilled weakly through the tall curtains of the mansion, but it brought no warmth to Elena. Her mind was still spinning from what she had discovered the night before. She sat at the kitchen table, the photograph of Mr. Beaumont and the woman still in her trembling hands. Her tea had gone cold. She couldn't stop staring at the face in that picture, the same face she had seen in the hospital, the same woman who had quietly taken care of Mr. Beaumont in his last days. Nurse Laura Green. Or, as the back of the photo said, Clara. Her thoughts were a storm. Why would Clara come back under a false name? Why didn't she reveal who she truly was to her dying father? Why pretend? Elena felt a strange pull in her heart, anger mixed with sorrow, curiosity mixed with fear. She had been there through everything, had seen Mr. Beaumont's loneliness, his regret, his fading strength. And now, this woman, the daughter he had spent years longing for, had been right there beside him, in secret. The house felt eerily silent, as though it too was listening to her thoughts. Every creak in the floor made her look up, half expecting someone to be standing there. She finally gathered her courage and went to Mr. Beaumont's old office once again. The faint scent of his cologne still lingered, and for a moment, she felt like he might walk in at any second, smiling that tired, gentle smile of his. But he was gone, and in his place were questions that refused to rest. Elena sat at his desk and opened the black notebook again. She turned to the last few pages, hoping to find one more clue. Her eyes landed on a line that made her skin prickle. If she ever comes back, I pray someone helps her understand. I don't know if I can make things right, but maybe she can forgive me before it's too late. She pressed her hand against the page. Forgive him? For what? Was it just for abandoning her mother, or was there something even deeper? Something he had done that neither of them could forget? Her phone rang suddenly, shattering the silence. The screen showed an unknown number. She hesitated but answered. Elena? The voice was calm, soft, a woman's voice. This is Clara Beaumont. Elena froze, her mouth suddenly dry. Clara, she whispered. You were the nurse. Laura Green. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a slow, heavy sigh. Yes, Clara said. I was. Elena gripped the phone tightly. Why did you lie? Why did you come here pretending to be someone else? Another silence. When Clara finally spoke, her voice sounded almost broken. Because I didn't want him to see me as a stranger asking for his money. I wanted to see him as a father, even if he didn't know who I was. Elena's heart ached. She could hear the pain in Clara's words, the same sadness that had filled Mr. Beaumont's eyes in his final days. You cared for him, Elena said softly. You were there when he... Yes, Clara said quietly. He didn't know it was me. But in those last days, I think he felt something. Maybe he guessed. He looked at me once, right before he closed his eyes, and he said, You have her eyes. Elena's throat tightened. She remembered that moment, Mr. Beaumont whispering weakly while she stood at his bedside. He had smiled faintly and touched the nurse's hand. You have her eyes. At the time, Elena had thought he was delirious. Now she realized he had recognized his daughter. Clara, Elena said gently, why didn't you stay? Why did you disappear after he died? Clara's voice grew cold. Because I didn't trust the people around him. Someone wanted me gone. Someone knew who I was, and didn't want me to get anything. A chill went down Elena's spine. Who? There was a pause, then Clara whispered, the lawyer. Mr. Grafton. He came to me the day before the will was read. He told me that my father had already written me out of it, that I was too late. But that wasn't true. I think he forged something. He's hiding the real will. Elena stood up, her pulse racing. You think he changed it? I don't think, Clara said. I know. My father told me the day before he died that he had rewritten it, that he was leaving me something important. But Grafton never showed that version. He made it look like my father barely remembered me. Elena remembered Mr. Grafton's calm, practiced smile, the way he had spoken during the will reading, confident and in control. Something about him had felt rehearsed, almost too polished. Could it be true? Had he altered the documents? Clara, Elena said, you should come here. We can look through his things together. Maybe there's proof. There was silence on the line. Then Clara said, I'll come tonight. But don't tell anyone I'm coming. Please, Elena. Not yet. Before Elena could respond, the line went dead. The rest of the day passed in uneasy stillness. Elena moved through the mansion like a ghost, checking every drawer, every corner of the study again, desperate to find something that could prove Clara's story. The old clock ticked in the hallway, echoing through the empty rooms. Outside, the sky turned gray again, heavy with clouds. When night finally fell, Elena waited by the front door, her nerves on edge. The wind howled softly across the empty fields outside, and the sound of distant thunder rolled through the sky. At last, around 10 o'clock, she saw headlights approaching the long driveway. A car stopped at the gates, and a woman stepped out, holding her coat tightly around her. When Clara walked in, Elena was struck by how much she resembled him. The same gray-blue eyes, the same tired kindness in her expression. But there was something else there too, a wariness, as if she'd been running from something for a long time. They went to the study, and Elena handed her the notebook. Clara opened it carefully, reading the pages in silence. When she reached the final entry, tears welled in her eyes. He remembered me, she whispered. All this time. I thought he forgot. Elena placed a hand on her shoulder. He never stopped looking for you. Clara looked up, her expression suddenly hardening. Then I'll find out who took that from him, who made him die thinking I was too late. Just then, a sound came from upstairs, a faint creak, like someone stepping on the wooden floor. Both women froze. Did you hear that? Clara whispered. Elena nodded, her heart pounding. This house is supposed to be empty. Another sound, a soft thud, closer this time. Clara set the notebook down and stood up slowly. Someone's here, she said in a low voice. Elena turned toward the staircase, her hands shaking. The lights flickered slightly, the air thick with tension. For a moment, she thought she saw a shadow move at the top of the stairs, a tall figure, standing still in the dark. Who's there? Elena called out, her voice trembling. No answer. Just silence. Clara took a cautious step forward. We should call the police, she whispered. But before Elena could move, the lights went out completely, plunging the mansion into darkness. She heard Clara gasp beside her, then the sound of hurried footsteps retreating upstairs. Elena! Clara hissed, reaching for her hand in the dark. They're here, whoever it is, they know we're looking. And as thunder cracked outside and the house shuddered under the storm, Elena realized with chilling certainty, this wasn't just about a missing will or a secret daughter anymore. Someone didn't want the truth to come out. And that someone was still inside the mansion with them. The darkness swallowed the house like a living thing. The lights had gone out in an instant, leaving only the sound of the storm outside and the shallow rhythm of their breathing. Elena's heart thudded in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears. She could barely see Clara beside her, just the faint outline of her face lit by the occasional flash of lightning through the window. For a few seconds, they didn't move, both frozen, listening. Somewhere above them, a floorboard creaked again. Then another. Someone was definitely there. Clara reached for Elena's hand and whispered, "We need to get to the study door and lock it." Elena nodded, her legs trembling. They moved quietly through the dark, their steps soft on the wooden floor. The air felt heavy, thick with fear. Every small sound, the ticking of the old clock, the drip of rainwater from the ceiling, made them jump. When they reached the door, Elena closed it slowly and turned the key, holding her breath. "What do we do now?" she whispered. Clara looked around the room, her eyes scanning the shadows. "We wait," she said softly. "And we listen." A long moment passed. The wind outside whistled through the cracks of the old windows, and thunder rolled again in the distance. Then, faintly, came another sound, the soft tap of footsteps moving down the hallway. Slow, deliberate steps, like someone who knew the house well. The handle of the study door rattled once. Elena felt a cold chill race up her spine. She clutched Clara's arm. "They're trying to get in." Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "Who's there?" she called. No answer. Just silence. Then, one sharp knock. Elena backed away from the door, her throat dry. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "Who would come here?" Clara shook her head. "Someone who knows what's in this house." She turned toward the small side cabinet near the fireplace and motioned to Elena. "Help me. If we have to run, there's another way out, through the old servants' passage behind this wall." Together they pushed the cabinet aside, revealing a narrow wooden door hidden behind it. The hinges groaned as Clara pulled it open. The smell of dust and decay drifted out, and the passage beyond was pitch dark. Elena hesitated. "Clara, where does it lead?" "To the wine cellar," Clara said. "From there, there's a door that opens near the garden." A loud bang came from the other side of the study door, someone trying to break it down. Without another word, they slipped into the narrow passage and closed the hidden door behind them. The sound of splintering would follow seconds later. Whoever was in the house had forced their way in. The passage was cold and narrow, barely wide enough for one person to move at a time. Elena could hear Clara's breathing ahead of her, quick and shallow. Their footsteps echoed softly on the old stone floor. The smell of damp air filled her nose. She tried not to think about what would happen if the person behind them found this passage too. After what felt like forever, they reached the bottom of the stairs leading into the cellar. Clara opened the small door quietly, and they stepped into the large, dusty room filled with old wine racks and wooden crates. It was dark, except for the faint light coming from the high basement window. Clara looked around, whispering, "There's a door at the far end. If we can reach it." But before she could finish, a loud crash echoed above them, the sound of furniture being thrown aside, footsteps moving quickly across the floorboards. Whoever had entered the mansion was searching for them. Elena's heart raced as she whispered, "Do you think it's him? Mr. Grafton?" Clara didn't answer right away. Her face was pale in the dim light. "If it's not him, then it's someone working for him. He's the only one who'd want us gone before we find the will." They moved across the cellar carefully, trying to stay quiet. But as they passed one of the old racks, Elena's foot hit a loose bottle. It rolled across the floor and shattered loudly against the wall. Both women froze. The sound from upstairs stopped instantly. Then, heavy footsteps, coming toward the cellar stairs. Clara grabbed Elena's wrist. "Run," she whispered. They hurried to the far door, pushing through old boxes and dusty shelves. The wooden steps behind them creaked under someone's weight. Whoever it was, they were coming fast. Clara found the metal door and pushed it open. Cold night air rushed in, mixing with the smell of wet grass and rain. They stumbled out into the garden, running through the darkness. The rain had stopped, but thunder still rolled far away. The mansion loomed behind them, its windows dark like empty eyes. When they finally reached the stone wall at the edge of the garden, they stopped to catch their breath. Clara turned back toward the house, her hair sticking to her wet face. "We can't stay here," she said. "We have to go somewhere safe, somewhere he can't find us." Elena nodded. "But where?" Clara hesitated. "There's an old cottage near the woods, the one where the gardener used to live. I saw it when I came before. We can hide there for the night." They moved quietly along the side path, their shoes squishing in the mud. The wind had calmed, but the silence was eerie, too quiet after what had just happened. The cottage appeared ahead, small and dark, half covered in ivy. Clara pushed the door open, and they stepped inside. It smelled of old wood and damp air, but it was dry and safe. They found a few candles in the drawer and lit them, their flickering light casting long shadows on the walls. For the first time in hours, Elena let herself sit down. Her whole body was shaking. "Clara," she whispered, "we need to call the police." Clara shook her head. "Not yet. We have no proof. Grafton has connections, they won't believe us without evidence. We need to find the real wolf first." Elena looked at her, exhausted and scared. "But how? He could destroy everything." Clara looked down, deep in thought. "My father said he left me something hidden, something only I would understand. Maybe it's still in the house." Elena's eyes widened. "You mean we have to go back?" Clara nodded slowly. "Tomorrow. Before he realizes we escaped. If the will exists, that's where it will be." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind outside. The candles flickered gently, their small flames reflecting in Clara's tired eyes. Then, suddenly, a soft knock echoed through the cottage door. Both women froze. Clara blew out the candle instantly, plunging them into darkness. The knock came again, slow, deliberate, like before. Elena's voice trembled. "How did they find us?" Clara's hand tightened around her arm. "I don't know." Another knock, harder this time. Then, through the silence, a man's voice came, calm and cold. "Ladies, you can't hide forever." Elena's breath caught in her throat. She recognized that voice. Mr. Grafton. He knew. He had followed them. The candles lay dark and dead beside them, and in the cold silence of the small cottage, fear wrapped around them like a living thing. The truth they were chasing had become dangerous, deadly even. And somewhere in the shadows outside, the man who wanted it buried was waiting. The air inside the old gardener's cottage was heavy and still. Elena and Clara stood in complete darkness, hearts racing, listening to the sound of Mr. Grafton's calm voice outside. "Ladies," he said again, his tone slow and deliberate. "This has gone far enough. You've been digging into things that were never meant to be found." Clara's hand gripped Elena's arm tightly. Neither of them dared to speak. They could hear the faint crunch of his shoes on the wet gravel outside, pacing back and forth in front of the door. Every step made Elena's stomach twist with fear. Then came a quiet click, the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. Clara's breath caught. She leaned close to Elena and whispered so softly it was barely a sound, "There's a back door, through the pantry. Move quietly." Elena nodded, her hands shaking. They began to back away slowly, their steps careful, almost silent. Outside, Grafton's voice continued, steady and controlled. "You think you understand what's going on," he said. "But you don't. That old man ruined everything for me. He was supposed to sign it over long before he got sick. And you," his voice hardened, "you ruined my plans." Lightning flashed through the small window, illuminating his shadow for a split second. He was standing only a few feet from the door. Elena and Clara slipped into the pantry, their breathing shallow. The wooden floor creaked faintly under their feet. Clara reached for the old back door handle and twisted it as quietly as she could, but it let out a sharp squeak. Grafton stopped speaking. They froze. Then came his voice again, colder this time. "You shouldn't have done that." A loud crash followed, the front door bursting open. "Run!" Clara hissed. She threw the back door open and they sprinted out into the night, the cold wind hitting their faces. Behind them, Grafton shouted angrily and footsteps thundered across the floorboards. They ran through the muddy path behind the cottage, their shoes slipping on wet grass. The night was thick with fog, and branches scratched their faces as they pushed through the overgrown garden toward the woods. Elena could barely breathe. Her chest burned, and her legs felt heavy, but fear kept her moving. They could still hear him behind them, closer now. "This way," Clara whispered, pulling her toward the trees. They ducked behind a thick oak, trying to catch their breath. The forest around them was silent except for the sound of rain dripping from the leaves. Then, from somewhere behind, came the sound of slow, careful footsteps again. Grafton was searching, moving through the trees, following them by sound. Clara leaned close and whispered, "He's after the will. That's all he wants. If we find it first, we can stop him." Elena shook her head, whispering, "But where would it be? We've looked everywhere in the house." Clara's eyes glinted in the dim light. "Not everywhere. My father once told me a story when I was little, before everything fell apart. He said there was a place in the house where he kept his secret safe beneath his heart. I thought it was just something he said." Elena frowned, trying to think through the fear. "Beneath his heart." "Clara, his study has a portrait of him, doesn't it? The one above the fireplace?" Clara's eyes widened. "Yes. And the floor beneath it." They both realized it at the same time. A hidden compartment. Something he had built himself, maybe long ago. The will had to be there. "We have to go back," Clara said, determination hardening her voice. Elena stared at her in disbelief. "Now? While he's looking for us?" "It's the only way to end this," Clara whispered. "If we find the real will, we'll have proof, and he can't hurt us without risking everything." Elena hesitated only a second, then nodded. "Let's finish this." They waited until the forest went quiet again before sneaking back toward the mansion. The fog was thicker now, swirling around the path as they moved. The great house rose ahead, its dark windows like watching eyes. When they slipped inside through the cellar door, the air was cold and damp. Every sound echoed. The house felt alive, whispering with the storm outside. They crept up the narrow staircase, careful not to make a sound. The corridor above was empty, though faint muddy footprints trailed across the floor, Grafton's, they guessed. In the study, the fireplace was dark. The portrait of Mr. Beaumont still hung above it, his painted eyes watching them solemnly. Clara stepped closer, her hands trembling as she touched the frame. "Beneath his heart," she whispered. She lifted the portrait slightly. Behind it was a metal panel, scratched and old, with a small keyhole. Elena's breath caught. "Do you have the key?" Clara reached into her coat pocket. "I think so." She pulled out a small brass key that had been attached to the leather notebook. "He left it for me, in a way." She slid the key into the hole and turned it slowly. With a soft click, the panel opened. Behind it was a small compartment built into the wall. Inside, wrapped carefully in an old envelope, was a folded document sealed with red wax. Clara's hands shook as she pulled it out and opened it. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting faint but clear, and the signature unmistakable. "It's the real will," she whispered. "He left everything to me, and he wanted the foundation to go to charity, not Grafton's company." Elena's heart raced with relief, but it lasted only a moment. From the doorway came a low, mocking voice. "Touching, isn't it?" They turned. Grafton was standing there, his face half lit by lightning flashing through the window. The gun was in his hand. "I told you," he said softly, stepping closer, "you shouldn't have come back." Clara held the will close to her chest. "You lied," she said, her voice shaking. "You forged everything. You used him." Grafton smiled faintly. "Used him? No. I protected what he built. That man would have given away everything for a daughter who didn't even know him." He raised the gun. Elena froze, her heart pounding so hard she thought she'd faint. Clara didn't move. Then, suddenly, a voice shouted from the hall. "Police! Drop it!" Grafton spun around in shock. 2 officers appeared at the door, flashlights cutting through the dark. In that instant of confusion, Clara threw the will toward Elena. It fluttered through the air like a fragile bird. The gun went off, the sound deafening. Elena screamed. Clara staggered back, clutching her arm. The officers rushed in, tackling Grafton to the ground. The gun clattered across the floor. "Clara!" Elena cried, running to her. Blood trickled from Clara's shoulder, but she managed a weak smile. "It's just a graze," she whispered. "I'm okay." One of the officers helped her up. The other cuffed Grafton, reading him his rights as he glared at them with cold fury. How did they find us?" Elena asked, her voice trembling. Clara winced but smiled faintly. "Before we left the cottage, I sent a text to Maria, your friend at the hospital. I told her where we were. I knew he'd come." Elena let out a shaky laugh, tears in her eyes. Relief washed through her like warm light. The nightmare was finally ending. The officers took Grafton away. The mansion fell silent again, the storm outside fading into a gentle rain. Clara looked down at the will in Elena's hands. "He really did remember me," she said softly. "He didn't forget." Elena nodded. "He never did." They sat together by the fireplace, watching the faint glow from the lightning fade through the windows. For the first time since his death, the house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt peaceful, as if the truth had finally set it free. But as the rain continued to fall softly outside, Elena couldn't shake one thought from her mind. Mr. Beaumont had written one final line in his notebook, one they still hadn't understood. "There are secrets that even love can't bury." What did he mean by that? Elena looked at Clara, who was staring into the flames, lost in thought. And deep down, she knew, there was still one more truth waiting to be uncovered. The morning after everything happened, the mansion stood in complete silence. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky so clear it almost felt unreal. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, turning the dust in the air into tiny, golden sparks. Elena stood by the grand staircase, staring at the broken front door where police had dragged Mr. Grafton out only hours before. The quiet felt strange now, not peaceful, but heavy, filled with the echo of everything that had just taken place. Clara was sitting in the drawing room, her arm wrapped in a clean bandage. The wound was shallow, but the exhaustion in her eyes said more than any injury could. She looked up as Elena entered, managing a faint, tired smile. "It's really over, isn't it?" she said softly. Elena nodded, but she wasn't sure she believed it. "It should be," she replied. "But something still doesn't feel finished." Clara tilted her head, watching her. "You mean the line from his notebook?" Elena nodded again. "There are secrets that even love can't bury. He wrote that knowing someone would find it. Maybe he meant Grafton's lies, or maybe something more." Clara looked down at her hands. "My father always had a way of hiding truths behind words. Maybe he wanted us to find something else." They both sat quietly for a long moment. Outside, the morning light grew brighter, falling across the portrait of Mr. Beaumont that still hung above the fireplace. His painted eyes seemed almost alive now, calm and knowing. Elena couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching them, waiting for them to understand something. After a while, Clara rose slowly from the couch. "There's one place we haven't looked," she said suddenly. "His bedroom. I couldn't go in there before, not after he passed. But maybe that's where the answer is." Elena hesitated for only a second before nodding. "Let's check." They walked together up the long staircase, their footsteps echoing softly on the marble. The house smelled faintly of rain and old wood. When they reached his room, Clara stood at the doorway for a moment, breathing deeply before she turned the handle. The door creaked open. The room looked exactly as it had the night he died. The curtains were half drawn, letting in slivers of sunlight. His bed was neatly made, though the sheets still carried faint wrinkles, as if he might return at any moment. On the bedside table sat a glass of water, untouched since that night, and the small lamp that Elena had switched off after his final breath. Elena's chest tightened at the memory. She could almost hear the sound of his voice again, weak but steady, thanking her for staying. Clara walked slowly to the old wooden wardrobe in the corner. "He kept everything important close," she said quietly. "Letters, photos, even his medals." She opened the door, and a faint smell of cedar drifted out. Inside hung a few old suits, carefully pressed, and several boxes stacked on the bottom shelf. Elena knelt and pulled one forward. It was dusty, the edges worn from years of use. When she opened it, they found bundles of letters tied with faded ribbons. Most were addressed to a woman named Eleanor Wright. Clara frowned, whispering, "That was my mother's name." She untied one of the letters carefully and began to read aloud. "My dearest Eleanor, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I was a coward, afraid of what people would say if they knew I had a daughter outside of marriage. But I've never stopped watching her from afar. She has your eyes. She deserves everything I could not give you. If anything ever happens to me, promise me she'll know I loved her." Clara's voice broke as she read the last line. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she pressed the letter to her chest. "He did care," she whispered. "He really did." Elena's throat tightened. He wasn't just feeling guilty. He was trying to make things right. They continued to search through the box. Beneath the letters, they found an old envelope marked for Clara, "When she is ready." Clara's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a small silver key and a note written in her father's careful handwriting. "My little star. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But I need you to know that my biggest regret wasn't losing my company, my wealth, or my health. It was losing time with you. I left something for you, not money, not property, but the truth. You'll find it where the river meets the hill, under the tree we planted together. Father." Clara wiped her tears and looked at Elena. "I remember that place," she said. "When I was a child, we planted a tree by the river near the old bridge. He said it would grow with us. I thought it died years ago." Elena stood and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then let's go see if it's still there." The day had turned bright and calm by the time they reached the riverbank. The grass was wet from the rain, and the air smelled fresh and clean. They followed the winding path down toward the water until they saw it, the tree. It stood tall and strong, its leaves glimmering in the sunlight. The ground beneath it looked slightly disturbed, as if someone had been there before. Clara knelt beside it, brushing away the soft earth with her hands. After a few minutes, her fingers touched something hard. She looked up at Elena, then dug faster. Soon, they uncovered a small metal box, sealed with a lock that fit perfectly with the silver key. Clara inserted the key and turned it. The lock clicked open. Inside the box was a small velvet pouch and a folded piece of paper. Elena watched as Clara opened the pouch. Inside was a locket, old, silver, and beautifully engraved. When she opened it, she found two tiny photographs inside, one of a young Mr. Beaumont holding a baby, and the other of a smiling woman with kind eyes. Clara's tears fell freely now. "It's my mother," she whispered. "And me." She unfolded the paper. It was another letter, written in the same neat handwriting. Clara. If you are reading this, it means the truth has finally found you. Mr. Grafton tried to hide my mistakes, thinking it would protect my name. But names mean nothing if love is buried with them. You are my legacy, not the company, not the wealth, but you. Everything I built belongs to you because you are the only thing I ever truly cared about. Forgive me for the years we lost. I hope, someday, you'll plant another tree in my name, not as a monument, but as a beginning. Clara folded the letter and held it close to her heart. The wind moved softly through the leaves above them, carrying with it the faint sound of the river. Elena stood beside her, quietly watching the sunlight dance across the water. After a long silence, Clara spoke. He was right. Some secrets shouldn't stay buried. But I think he finally found peace. Elena smiled gently. And so did you. They stayed by the river for a while longer, the sound of the water and the rustle of the leaves wrapping around them like a quiet song. Then Clara reached into her pocket and pulled out the locket again. She fastened it around her neck, letting it rest over her heart. He's still with me, she whispered. As they walked back toward the mansion, the air felt lighter somehow, as if the house itself had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. In the weeks that followed, the truth about Grafton's fraud spread quickly. The authorities seized his forged documents, and Clara officially took ownership of the Beaumont estate. But instead of selling it, she turned it into something new, a foundation for children who had no families, no homes, no safety. She named it the Silver Tree Foundation. Every year, she and Elena would visit the river to see the tree they'd found. It grew stronger with each passing season, its branches reaching higher into the sky. And each time, Clara would whisper the same words to the wind, "Thank you, Father." One afternoon, as the sun set behind the hills, Elena stood beside her and said softly, "He'd be proud of you." Clara smiled, the light catching in her eyes. "I think he already knows." The story of the billionaire and his lost daughter became a quiet legend in the town, a reminder that truth always finds a way to surface, no matter how deeply it's buried. And though their lives had changed forever, Elena often found herself thinking back to those words she'd first read in his notebook, "There are secrets that even love can't bury." Now, she finally understood what he meant. Love doesn't erase the past, it transforms it. It turns regret into remembrance, pain into purpose. And as the river flowed endlessly beneath the golden light, Elena knew this wasn't just the end of a story. It was the beginning of something better. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life.